Hello, my name is Jim Kemna. I'm the Director of Religious Education for the Diocese of Jefferson City. And this is a video version of one of our Jumpstart workshops. Now, Jumpstart workshops, there's 5 of them altogether, are especially for parish catechists, and particularly for parish catechists that are new at what we're doing. This particular workshop is on creating a classroom environment that's positive and Christian, or discipline in the classroom. If you are interested in getting catechist certification for this workshop, which is available, we have a packet of material for you which includes handouts of articles and resources on this issue and some worksheets. Now, the articles and resources are yours to keep, and you can use them at any time you want. If you want catechist certification for this, we would ask you to fill out the worksheets and send them in to the office. The address is on the material that you have, and you'll get credit for what you are doing in this workshop. If you take all 5 Jumpstart workshops, you'll get a certificate for a basic catechist certification level. So we really encourage you to take a look at this. I want to talk a little bit about my own experience of discipline in the classroom. When I first started teaching, I taught high school religion really right after college. And I didn't have a lot of experience with teaching, and I had no education background in teaching. My education background was in theology. So when I got this job to teach high school religion, one of my fears was, what am I going to do about classroom behavior? I was totally clueless. And the school I taught in really didn't give us much background either. So I entered the classroom with a lot of fear, and that really dominated. And what I ended up doing in the classroom in terms of discipline was kind of let a lot of things go. I tended to be very passive. And of course, as time goes on, and I had some classrooms with 35 kids in it, and I have to admit, for the most part, those kids were really pretty good considering what I was doing or not doing in terms of discipline. But things would kind of build up in the room, and slow but sure there would be a lot of talk, and the kids would be misbehaving. So I would switch from passive to aggressive and begin yelling to try to just calm everybody down and establish discipline, establish control in the classroom again. So that ended up being sort of a vicious cycle. After yelling, the kids would calm down and then slowly build back up to the kind of hubbub that would be going on in the classroom, and I'd yell again. And in some periods of the day where there were more active kids, I was doing that a lot. That was not a good way to discipline. And I've learned a lot since then. And I think I've maybe made this a study a little bit more in myself, just because I had such a bad experience at the beginning. But what I'm going to ask you to do, and we'll do this several times in this particular workshop, is I'll ask you to pause the video and either think about a question, write about a question, or share a question with people around you if you're working in a group. But what I'd like you to think about at this point as you pause is, what's your own experience as a catechist, or maybe even as a parent or teacher, of discipline in the classroom or at home? What method do you use? If you haven't been a catechist so far and you're going to start up, or you're already starting up, how are things going? What are some of your hopes or fears that you might have about this? And what might be some of your weaknesses that you're kind of thinking, oh, might get exposed? So just write about that, talk about that a little bit, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. One thing I'd like you to think about just as we get started here is, what's your discipline style? I mentioned before that I kind of went from passive to aggressive. And a lot of the people that really work with discipline and do workshops on discipline talk about three discipline styles. Passive, where you're not really taking charge in the classroom. You're letting things go. One of the problems with that method, although sometimes someone who's passive is just trying to be nice to kids, be their best friend, that sort of thing, but one of the problems is someone in that room is going to take charge. And if it's not you, then it's going to be somebody else. And because you're responsible for what goes on in that room, the passive method is going to get you into trouble. Now, another method I mentioned, I kind of swung back and forth, is the aggressive method. And this would be the method that's really heavy-handed, tends to be angry, hopefully would not get to any kind of physical punishment, because that would be absolutely out of the question for any kind of classroom. But the aggressive method tends to use anger and kind of manipulation to control the kids. The difficulty with that in a catechetical classroom is it doesn't really fit the message of Jesus very well. And although you might maintain control, I have a feeling that the kids themselves are not going to be learning the real lessons we want them to teach them. The other and more appropriate method is an assertive method. An assertive method can be very calm, very friendly, really. However, it really sets some definite boundaries and challenges the young people to respect those boundaries and works with them more than punishes them if there's an issue or they forget or there's a problem of some kind. So what we want to try to do in this workshop is to try to help you see how you can be an assertive catechist in the classroom, use assertive discipline. First of all, I think it's important also to consider, why do kids misbehave in a classroom? And there's books written on this, but I think there's 4 major motivations or reasons that students are going to get out of line. One is a need to belong. You know, a lot of times students act up for one another. They want to feel like we're friends in here, we can have fun, and sometimes all of that need to belong, particularly if it's a pretty active group anyway. Belonging might be joining in the acting out, joining in the kind of creating problems for the catechist possibly. So that could be it. And I think one of the things that's important for a catechist to say, okay, how can I work with this motivation that's behind this? The next issue, or sometimes why kids misbehave, would be a lack of leadership. Kind of already talked about this. If whoever is in charge, the catechist or teacher, doesn't take charge, then most likely there's going to be a lot of acting out. And I've seen some really bad examples of this where even good kids who would normally behave sort of lose it in a classroom where there's no good, strong leadership on the part of the catechist or the teacher. Another reason kids act out is environment. If the environment is real distracting, if the environment kind of is tempting, you know, 2 real good friends sitting right next to each other, that can really create a problem. If they're, and some of the distractions that might be present wouldn't necessarily be the room setup as much as maybe one kid has a cell phone. Another kid's got a little Game Boy or DS or whatever they call them these days. So all of those kind of things can create problems, or if the catechist creates activities that tend to send all the kids off the deep end in terms of behavior. So those kind of things have to be controlled, or else behavior is going to really get out of hand. Finally, I think students a lot of times will act out because they're just bored. And I know this puts a lot of pressure on catechists and teachers sometimes. What are you going to do to keep the kids entertained? Catechists aren't supposed to be entertainers, but a good variety of activities that help students feel like we're not just doing the same old all the time, just reading from the text or just listening to somebody kind of drone on. But a variety of interactive activities can really help. So I would challenge you to think about those 4 motivations or reasons for misbehavior and how you can counteract those as a catechist. I want to talk to you first of all about creating a positive environment so that you can do this ahead of time. A catechist is in total control of this, how to make sure that you create an environment in your room where acting out those 4 reasons are shrunk down. First of all, be positive and take charge. Even if you're really afraid of what's going to happen, be positive about the classroom, your role as a catechist, and try to go in with a very enthusiastic attitude. That will speak to the students and really, I think, make a big difference. I think you're halfway there if you're not obviously shaking in your boots. I guess, it's the old saying, never let them see you sweat. So you may have to pep yourself up before class. The other thing is take charge, be the leader. In other words, you are the one that's initiating, you are the one that's setting up a situation where it's going to really be more successful. The probability of success is going to be more likely. I think as a first step, even before classes get started, and if your classes are already started, you might step back and do this, call the parents of all the kids and just introduce yourself to them and tell them what you want to try to do this year with the kids, so that if there is an issue later on where you have to contact the parents, it's not going to be the first time they've heard from you. Also, you can ask the parents, is there anything I need to know about your child that's going to help me be a good teacher? So maybe the child is on medication. Maybe they've been diagnosed with a learning problem or learning disability. Maybe there's special needs. Maybe there's issues that have come up with school in their public school that the parent wants to talk to you about. So that, I think, is really key. And you can ask the parents if they'll give you their email address, partly because you want to stay in touch with them as much as you can the whole year. And this doesn't mean you send something out every week, but you can send emails out and let the parents know what you're doing. I think it's just a good bridge so that if something does happen later on, they're not going to feel like, well, who is this? Who's this person? And why am I all of a sudden hearing about problems? You want to try to convince the parents in this first conversation that you are dedicated and you want the best for their child, and you're going to work hard to help their child learn about their faith. I think that lays a good groundwork. The next step you can take is to make sure you know who the kids are. You can call them by name. A lot of teachers will start off right away with name tags. Even if you only have 5 or 6 kids, name tags can really help so that you can greet them at the door of your first class and hand them a name tag. And the first class can be a little bit of time right at the beginning of playing a little name tag game in a sense. You can say, okay, think your first name, think of an animal that might suit you, that the first letter of that animal's name starts with the same letter that your first name does, or an adjective, like Jolly Jim or Silly Sam or whatever it would be. And I think that kind of is fun for the kids, and it helps you get to know them a little bit. You can also ask the kids, tell me a little bit about yourself, just to kind of create a little bit of a connection with them. One of the things that most people that do work with discipline will say is a key is the catechist's relationship with the student. If you create a bond with the students, they're going to respond to you much more quickly, and they will respond much more positively to correction than if there's a big gap between you and them. So you want to try to do that, and try to, if you can remember birthdays or whatever else you might do to kind of create a special environment for the kids. I would very, very much advise that. Another thing that you want to do is have a seating arrangement. Sometimes, I know, you're going to be in a regular classroom that might belong to another teacher who teaches Catholic school in your parish. And so it's not really your room to do whatever you want with it. But I think it might be important to communicate with that teacher, if you are in someone else's classroom, to find out what you can do to maybe rearrange a little bit if you set everything else back up before they're back in the room the next day, or to maybe see what you can do to cooperate with them to create that environment that's going to be conducive to learning. But the seating arrangement is crucial. You want to make sure that you don't have students crowded in together. You want to make sure that you don't have people sitting next to each other that are going to create problems. You want to make sure you give students some space, some personal space, and an ability to focus. I know my daughter, when she taught first grade, she came home after the first day very disappointed in how things went. And she was very idealistic. She thought, I'm going to have the kids sitting in a circle, we'll be all there together, we'll be this nice little group. Well, it didn't work out very well. The circle was it really created a problem. So my wife, who's a teacher, just advised her at the beginning, just kind of sit the kids in rows and kind of move them so that they're not going to be distracting one another. If you're seated around tables, you might make sure that you only have a couple of kids at a table and that they're not real crowded. However you need to do it for your own situation, that seating arrangement is just crucial. It's vital that you're organized. You want to plan your lesson so you know what's going on. If you're not well organized, that's really going to show. One of the ways that you can be organized is to get there early. If you're getting there at the same time when the kids are getting there, that's going to be a problem. You need to be there at least 5 minutes early so you can greet them when they come into the room and that you can sit them down. One of the things that is really important that I think a lot of good teachers will do, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on again, is have an opening activity. I know when I started teaching, the kids would all come in the room and I was just kind of getting ready and the bell hadn't rung yet, and I know in a lot of catechetical situations there's no actual bell, but the time to start wasn't there yet. And in that kind of sort of downtime before everybody got going, problems started. And a lot of good teachers that I've talked to will say, I always have something for the kids to do, a little word search or a crossword puzzle or game or coloring activity that they can do right when they get in the room. So they sit down and they start this activity. And it's a little fun activity, but it kind of helps them focus and it helps them kind of get settled and into what we're going to be doing. I would very much advise that. Your textbooks may have some of that kind of material in it. I have a couple of websites I'll mention later on that have plenty of material like that. There's all kinds of stuff online. I did just a quick search online and found all kinds of material. So I would really advise that. You want to have a good lesson plan that flows through the class and has some variety. Again, your textbooks will help you there. You're going to have to take attendance every class. So you can do that in a kind of a fun way, though, and you can even have the kids help you do that. So I would, recommend, kind of doing that with some sort of interactive sort of maybe little game that you can do with the kids to take attendance. You can even give kids some of the leadership roles that way. And that brings us to our next point. If you give the kids some leadership roles in the classroom, especially kids that might be more active, you'd have a student that takes role. You'd have a student that passes out material. You'd have a student that leads prayer. You'd have a student that maybe is a volunteer in one of your activities. You have a student that reads or maybe helps the group move from one activity to the next. However this might work out, that's a really good, because then they feel like they're a part of what's going on. The more they feel like they're a part of the group, the better you're going to be. Also, I would encourage you to use music. Maybe you've got some calm music playing at the beginning of class to calm them. Maybe halfway through the class, you get everybody up and do a little exercise music thing. It's a little 2-minute, let's do head and shoulders, knees and toes. I'm dating myself here, I know. But anyway, there are lots of fun little songs, the kind of vacation Bible school songs that you can get a hold of that are great. You can buy CDs at Walmart with all kinds of music like this. So the kids, A, have something to look forward to, but also it just kind of gets them active a little bit and exercise and then settle back down. One of the things that I really recommend as well is that you affirm good behavior. I know teachers that will use stickers for this. And you don't have to give out candy bars or anything like that, because a lot of parents may not like that too much anyway. But just to have a chart on the wall with all the kids' names on it and each classroom date and kind of a grid. And for each student that does well that day or evening, put a sticker in their little box and give them a sticker to take home. And so they can let the parents know, then email their parents and let them know, your child just did great this week. Particularly if you've had a little bit of problem with that student before and they improve and they're really trying, make sure to let them know. Use lots of praise and lots of reinforcement of what you expect them to do in terms of good behavior. Another thing, and I'll mention this a little bit more again, I think it would be a good thing, a good motivator, to have 5 or 10 minutes of fun at the end of class, so that the kids are kind of looking forward to that, and they're wondering, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do this evening? So that, it might be a little game that you play with the kids, and there's lots of books and material with kids' games. Again, online, you can find a lot of this. Or we at the Religious Ed office have lots of this kind of thing too. Check out your textbook website for this kind of thing. Because if the kids know, we're going to have some fun at the end of class here. We're not sure what it's going to be this time around, but we're looking forward to that. And if there's real problems in the class, what you can do is you can say, I'm sorry, but the time for our fun activity at the end of class is ticking down. And that can be a motivation for the kids to kind of discipline themselves. So you're not always after them and saying, don't do this, don't do that, but just start looking at your watch and say, we're losing time here. I really have a great activity for the end of class, but we're not going to be able to do it if we don't get through what we really need to talk about during this class. Also, use a sign for getting the group's attention or for helping one or the other student realize they're kind of stepping beyond the boundaries. My wife uses the little zip your mouth sign. She doesn't even say anything to the students. She'll just go like that. Or the V sign. Sometimes teachers have a little bell they'll ring. You know, if it gets a little out of hand, you can also always flash the lights a little bit. But you don't want to get to the point where you're kind of like getting angry. And the students will themselves realize, oh, we've got to get back to you. We've been talking too much, and you know, here's the bell ringing, and we've got a little V sign going out there. Let's bring this back together. So you create that environment of we're all working together here. This is the end of our first part. We're going to pause a little bit, and then you can move on to the next track of this DVD. But I'd like you to think about what you're going to be doing in your classroom yourself, and maybe read one of the articles or some of the material in the handouts that we have, and think, what are some ideas you'd like to try that we've talked about here, or maybe that we haven't talked about? Maybe in your interaction, if you're working with a group, you're already talking about ideas that I haven't even mentioned. So I'll see you back in a little bit. Hello and welcome back. This is really part 2 of our program on creating a classroom environment or discipline. This part we're going to try to really look at establishing clear rules or expectations. They have to be clear and they have to be consistent. And the kids, the students, need to have a sense that they're fair. And I have some ideas about this that I think will be very helpful, particularly in the religion classroom, in the catechetical classroom. One of the things that I think is important for us to think about is the connection between the word discipline and discipleship. It's something that we really have an advantage in the sense that, you know, the public school classroom, it's just about discipline. And they may be talking about certain behavior characteristics they're looking for. As Christians and Catholics, we're talking about discipleship. So what we're doing as a group together is not just sort of the teacher is wanting everybody to pay attention because this is something the teacher is trying to make everybody do, or motivating people to be good and nice in the room, but it's how can we follow Jesus as students? And one of the things I think that catechists can do when they are beginning, this will be done right at the beginning of the year, talking to kids about what are we going to do in here, how are we going to do this, how are we going to make sure that we all work together to create an environment where we can all learn. But not only learn, it's be good disciples with one another. I don't know if you can do this at all age levels, but I think that most kids would respond to maybe a little Bible study here. We have a lot of advice or challenge for us in the Bible about our behavior as Christians. And the catechist can use some of these scripture quotes. One of the handouts in the packet it will have a whole list of scripture quotes that a catechist could use. You could even do a little Bible study with the kids. Romans 12, verse 9 and following has a lot of challenge for all of us who are living and working and learning together as Christians how we behave with one another. The real famous passage is 1 Corinthians 13, which is love is patient, love is kind, etc., etc. And, you know, with the kids, you can use these passages to say, this is what Jesus is calling us to. What do you think about that? And how can we try to make sure in the classroom we're doing what Jesus is calling us to be doing? So I think that sets it up. It's not just me as a catechist saying, here's what I want you to do, but it's Jesus calling us to something. The other thing I think that you can do is, as a catechist, to use Scripture in another way to kind of challenge the students to live up to certain virtues. A good example of this, and I think they might even fit the school year fairly well, are the fruits of the Spirit found in Galatians 5:22 and 23. Love, joy, peace, patience, etc., etc. You could use one of those fruits of the Spirit each month and kind of talk to the kids as you meet with them. Okay, this month it's love. And so how can we be people of love in here? What are the kind of things we need to be doing? And even remind them, if things maybe get out of hand a little bit, about our fruit of the Spirit that we're talking about this month. I myself believe this next step is so important, particularly with the older kids, but I think the younger kids as well. Involve the students in the process of actually coming up with the rules for good behavior in a classroom. And I have no problem with calling them rules. The kids know what you're talking about there, and I think it's just going to be clear what you're trying to set up right off the bat. But I think once you do your discussion of discipline and discipleship, to brainstorm with the kids, either use a chalkboard or a whiteboard or easel paper, something. Brainstorm with the kids the answer to a question like, if we're going to have a class that's a friendly place to learn and really think about our faith, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be avoiding? And just ask them that question and ask them, what do you think, kids? And they may come up with things that would be very surprising to you. My experience is the majority of kids don't want to waste their time with you. So there may be a few that really are just about acting up, but the majority of kids want to do something that's going to make it worthwhile. So you'll get a lot of things on your list that might even be tougher than what you would set up. Overall, what you want to do, though, is to have about 5, 6 rules. Should be simple, fairly straightforward. One of the articles in the packet, an example they give of some of the rules would be, when you want to talk, raise your hand. It's very simple. And it's pretty positive, too. When someone else is talking, listen. Keep hands and feet to self. Follow teacher's instructions. And no food, toys, games, or cell phones in the room. That'll cover a lot of bases. It's important, if you're going to create a list like this, that you have it on a chart. So if you brainstorm it and everybody comes up with their ideas, maybe the kids have other ideas than what these 5 are that I've listed. You may, as a catechist, say, well, okay, I'll list some of yours, but I have a few I want to throw in here just to make sure that you're happy with, being pretty inclusive of what you feel satisfied with. But then you put it on a poster paper, newsprint, whatever, and have that up in the room for forever, for the entire year. That way, if there's something that's a problem, you can remind them, what you may want to make sure that they realize that they're stepping out of bounds. The other thing I think is really good is to create, on a sheet of paper, maybe kind of make it look kind of fancy, once you get your list of rules, a little covenant that could be titled Classroom Covenant, however you want to do this, and you place the rules in there, and then you maybe mention a little something in there about the idea that we're following the Lord here, following the Lord's call to behave appropriately and to be Christian disciples together. And then at the bottom, I promise to do everything in my power to live up to this covenant of behavior that we have set out for our classroom. And then they sign it and you sign it and date it. and send that home so the parents know what's going on and the parents have a pretty good idea of what's expected. And the students have kind of made a promise here that they're going to take this seriously. It's a covenant. So that kind of agreement, I think, is a good ground level to start with, and then you can move on from there. This is the end of our second segment, and I just would like you to think about, write about, or discuss with the people there with you if you're working with a group. What are your current rules, or what have you used in the past as classroom rules? How have you come up with them? How have you promoted them with the kids? Did you let the parents know about it? And maybe, have we talked about anything here that you'd like to try as you move in to another year, or you continue your year as a catechist? Thank you, and we'll be back in just a minute.